Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. Come with us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance, and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I identify as a cisgender woman, and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I have a conversation with Cameron, a Doctor of Computer Science and University lecturer. Cameron's pronouns are she and her, and she is a newly discovered woman. She refers to herself as female but trans. Find out what that means to Cameron in this episode. We also talk about gender roles in society and relationships, how life has changed after coming out only a month before this conversation took place, and the role of loss in embracing your true self. Please be aware that there is mention of abuse and death in this episode. It was recorded on the 18th of January 2021. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Cameron.
Hi, Cameron. And how do you identify?
I am female but transgendered.
Okay. And what does that mean to you?
Well, primarily I see myself as female and I am a woman, but due to the genetic quirk that is me, I happen to have the male biology, but I am to all the ways that matter female.
And is this something you have always known about yourself?
There has always been some hint, some misunderstood rather than unknown part of me having the female essence rather than necessarily being sort of an effeminate man. It was a case of I wasn't complete, but due to my age and when I was growing up, it was very difficult to actually nail down until quite recently what that missing piece was.
So, yeah, you say quite recently. So when did you, embrace your identity?
I officially, a month ago today, at
Wow,
the
congratulations.
mid-December.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
amazing. Yeah. I mean, how's it been for you since then? I know it's only been a month, but still.
I'm very fortunate to be within a very educated and liberal community at the university. So I've had nothing but love and support from all of my colleagues. My students didn't bat an eyelid. And so generally, I couldn't have wished for anything more supportive or better.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yay. And how do you see your journey progressing? What do you want to do next? What's next for you?
Next is effectively just taking up all of the almost cosmetic elements that would make my actual image match my self image. So things like I'm starting to wear more makeup. As soon as we're able to, I will be going to get my ears done and pierced, and eventually top surgery to just finish off the look.
Yeah, that's all very exciting, isn't it?
It's both exciting and almost just natural because what I discovered was not so much that it was a discovery of my identity, it was more allowing it out
Yeah.
and actually embracing it rather than having repressed it for years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how did that show up in your early years? Like the way you felt about yourself and how.
Well, I wish that I could say that it was one of those stereotypical ones you see on all of the trans documentaries. It really wasn't. It was a lot more subtle than that. But the first hint that I was, shall we say, non typical was actually my third day at primary school when I got incredibly aggrieved that all of the girls were allowed to dress differently, act differently, do different things, and I wasn't. And I couldn't understand why not, and no one was able to explain it to me. But this is back in the mid 80s when obviously it was a troubling time for lots of different non-typical groups.
Mm-hmm.
Had I been younger, had this happened more recently in the more accepting society, I'm sure it would have been picked up a lot sooner, but it wasn't. And so
Mm-hmm.
there was just this sort of unknown. It wasn't really an elephant in the room because we didn't know that it was an elephant. It was just this thing, a sort of amorphous grey cloud sitting
Yeah.
there meaning something, but don't know what it is or what it means.
Yeah, that's such a good point because I've heard other people say as well on the podcast about I knew, like Annie, for example, Angus said, I knew I was queer before I knew how I was queer. So it's all about having the language for it. There was not really any language for it until you come across the words and the labels, essentially. And then I guess you feel a type of resonance with it, I suppose. Do you find that?
Um, yes and no, and
Mm.
that I think comes across in the way that I identify is that I don't see myself as a trans person first.
Mm-hmm.
I see myself as female. It's the
Mm-hmm.
mechanics that makes me trans rather than the identity.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't know back then that there was the gender spectrum. It was very much binary or nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So, sort of going a bit further in your life, how did it show up for you in any relationships you might have had?
Um, so the one incident that I seem to use as the prime example was about 7 years old. I happened to be going to a friend's house for tea,
Mm-hmm.
and as kids do, for reasons most unknown to ourselves, um, we decided to raid his mother's wardrobe, and
Mm-hmm.
he was clicking around in a pair of 4-inch red patent leather pumps and a silk scarf.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to go for a bikini.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah.
no real concept of why or even what it meant at that stage, but
Mm-hmm.
this was kind of emblematic of what ended up becoming a larger part of trying to find something. Later on, during the teenage years, I was raiding my mother's underwear drawer quite regularly, and then also would progress to trying on her clothes and shoes and things, just trying to sort of make sense of what it was I was feeling because the normal male environment didn't seem to work for me. I can't really describe what work means. It's just not necessarily wrong, but different, incomplete, unnatural, I suppose is a good word.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was other points in my life where again it was quite focused around dressing and appearing female, but I've since discovered that actually it's more than just appearances. It's the whole way of interacting with other people in a far more soft, far more caring and compassionate rather than abrupt and adversarial that I'm trying to achieve. So I can now see how that might have been the first steps, but it
Mm-hmm.
definitely wasn't what it was all about.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like maybe, or not even it sounds like, because I think maybe sometimes there's all these stereotypical gender roles in society, obviously.
Yeah.
And maybe did you maybe for a while wonder if you were just like or if you were simply just a really sensitive man, if that was all there was to it.
It was difficult because I was kind of conditioned to be the masculine man
Hmm.
and abrupt, and sort of felt that I had to play that role
Hmm.
rather than fighting against it. It was just a case of there was this other thing over here that was
Mm.
very much different to that. And it wasn't what I'd taught to have been.
Mm.
And so, because I was constantly being reconditioned to be male in all of the ways that I suppose my parents, more than anything else, envisaged it,
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't have that kind of exposure to just a case of a sensitive guy or
Mm.
or even an effeminate guy. I had to play the role that I was being shown.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever speak to your parents about how you felt in yourself?
No, my parents and I have a very difficult relationship, and I've
Mm-hmm.
become aware that, in fact, what I suffered as a kid was effectively abuse. It was not something that I was going to really be having any kind of conversations with them about,
Mm-hmm.
and the scars of that abuse really only entrenched the expectations and the role I was supposed to play, which
Mm-hmm.
is why it's taken quite so long and a very difficult year to produce all of the required ingredients to allow me to have actually found myself, found
Mm-hmm.
what I should have always been.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, what made you come out when you did? Why last December?
Why last December?
Yeah.
Um, Simply, it was a case of all of the pieces came together,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an incredibly goal and action oriented person. I have always been.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a case of, once I'd been through with my therapist all of the constituent parts and all of the feelings and unpicked everything, including the abuse,
Mm-hmm.
um, it was a case of, I was pretty much 95 to 98% of the way sure that this was who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I'd had my, well, final, for now, I suppose, session with her, I was able to get the sort of affirmation I needed to say that this wasn't some other coping strategy or some other neuroses or even just wishful thinking. This was actually who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And once she was able to give me that, it was a case of, well, there's absolutely no reason why I should go on living not as me.
Mm.
And so I just basically decided, yeah, that's it. I am out. I'm proud, and this is me.
Yay. Excellent. Yeah. So when you eventually got away from home,
Hmm.
how did things sort of develop from there?
Well, at that stage, I was still very much trying to play these roles of
Mm-hmm.
the normal, straight, upstanding, respected father, husband, provider type role.
Mm.
I had met a woman that became later my wife,
Mm-hmm.
and we deeply love each other, or until she died at the very least. We both loved each other. I still
Mm-hmm.
love her, but it meant that I repressed the large portion of me in
Mm.
order to fit into that role.
Mm.
As we both got older, as these this side of me, I suppose, became more aware of itself, even if I was only subconsciously aware of it, we started actually playing around with gender roles and power play and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I got far more out of it than she did, although
Mm-hmm.
that's just how it goes. It goes
Right.
sometimes. Unfortunately, she never actually got to see the full transformation because I lost her 15 months ago.
Mm.
Um, and that was one of the big emotional driving forces that sort of set all of this in motion for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. So when you said you're female but trans,
Yes.
it kind of like sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? So how does that fit? I mean, you're the first person I've heard say it in those words. So
Okay.
what made you choose those words?
I'm quite dismayed, I suppose is the right word,
Mm-hmm.
at the sheer number of labels, even within the trans feminine community, at all of the different types of identification and things. I think last time I actually looked, there was about 17 different labels, even within trans femme,
Mm-hmm.
and none of them really expressed who I was,
Mm-hmm.
because to all intents and purposes I am female. I just have the wrong plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not trying to actually be a trans person first. I'm not trying to be trans femme or any of the other labels. I am female. Trans is just the mechanism because I had the wrong bits.
Mm.
And so I'm trying to, at least for lots of the people that I come into contact with, try and contextualize it in the right way, rather than it being I'm this new different thing that crosses over trans femme. It's actually, no, to all intents and purposes I am a woman. I just had a genetic quirk,
Yeah.
and that's the sort of the a kind of conviction I've got, I suppose, that it's not adhering to binary for binary's sake. It's more,
Mm.
that is what I should have been. There's just this mechanism afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because I think like some years ago when it was about transitioning, it was
Hmm.
very much that people had to play like had to really perform gender, didn't they, to get taken seriously about,
Yes.
transitioning and stuff. And obviously non-binary is a lot more of a thing these days.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've heard people say that they were wondering if they were non-binary for a while, but then came to the conclusion that no, it's actually just, you know, quite a binary transition. Yeah.
Yes, I
Um,
can. I can completely understand that. I mean,
mm,
I'm a university lecturer. I've seen students transition both ways, and we've got more uptake of non-gendered pronouns and non-binary identifications. So
mm,
I do see it quite often, and maybe it is also a site of I'm not that, but I think just generally my case is a little bit simpler, in
mm,
that it's not a complicated non-binary arrangement or belief or whatever the correct terminology is. It's I am genuinely female. I just
mhm,
have the wrong bits.
mhm, mhm. And how are you in your attractions? Obviously, you say you've been married to a woman.
Hmm.
Are you solely female attracted, or is there more there?
There is far more there. I consider myself straight for a woman,
Mm-hmm.
meaning yes, I am attracted to men.
Mm-hmm.
I deeply loved my wife, and we always had a awkward, I suppose, is the best word I can think of, sex
Mm-hmm.
life, in that yes, we both played our parts, but there was something not quite right about it and not quite fulfilling for everyone. Looking back on it, I can see that that all came from me not being into the male role in sex, and therefore she wasn't getting what she needed out of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's become clearer as I've allowed myself to actually think as me, rather than the constrained and misgendered me.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't actually anything to do with us in terms of a compatibility or anything like that. It
Mm-hmm.
was a case of that wasn't really for me, and that role wasn't what I wanted to be.
Yeah. So more of an incompatibility between your identity and your biology, I suppose.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, yeah. What is something you would like people to know, either about you or about gender?
Um, the biggest regret I have through my journey so far is
Mhm.
that it took so long to start, and that I didn't have the opportunity to experience the full richness of my gender. And
Mhm.
so what I would say is that it's a truly liberating and even exciting thing to actually start living as you. So
Mhm.
if there's any question that anyone has about that they might not be their assigned gender or their assigned role, explore it and try to actually find your own path, and don't necessarily worry about how somebody else might take it. All those people in your life that you want to be there will be loving and supportive, and you don't need to be somebody else or play the role just because somebody else says so.
Mhm.
And that's one of the biggest things I've managed to take away from my journey so far is
Mhm.
be true to yourself and live how you want to.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. That kind of goes for everyone, right? Gender
Absolutely.
journeys
I mean,
or different journeys.
it doesn't matter where on which spectrum you are. Be true to yourself and be happy, and don't have to conform to somebody else.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. For the future, what kind of relationship would you ideally like to have?
A loving one is is the first one.
That sounds good.
Um, I'm incredibly eager and excited to actually try out the romantic and sexual side of my new role.
Mhm.
Well, the one I should have always had. I know it's going to be different. How and with whom is the question that I suppose is everybody's question when getting into any relationship.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I don't see it being any really different apart from a a parenting point of view, as in I'm not a biological female, so I cannot be a mother.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that I can't play the role of a mother. It would just be either through adoption or surrogacy or whatever
Mhm.
in order to get there. But yes, I would expect to be the female in the relationship. I would expect ultimately to be a wife, I guess,
Mhm.
assuming that A, I could do find somebody, and B, we both want to go there.
Mhm. Yeah. What can other people do to make things better for you and people like yourself?
I think I'm actually a relatively low maintenance lady in that I'm not looking for any kind of extra special treatment. I guess the only thing that I would be asking additionally of anyone is a little bit of understanding that this is who I am,
Mhm.
rather than forcing their impression of me on the relationship. Other than that, it's actually a very good modern world out there for at least that I've experienced, in terms of access to services, making things a little bit more inclusive wherever that it's possible. There's not the gaping holes there once was for any non-stereotypical gender, sexuality, or anything else,
Mhm.
which I think everyone has to be proud of, that we've actually come so far relatively in a short period of time. I'm
Mm.
sure there's more to do, and I'm not at all minimizing the effect that some people have, and the bigotry and the injustice that some people face. I haven't, but because I see myself as female first, I just like to be treated like any other woman. And that's a lot more an advanced cause than it is any of the other spectrum genders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in your month of living as your true identity,
Mhm.
have you noticed much of a difference in how other people respond to you besides, obviously because of your presentation now and stuff, but like when you look at the whole gender roles in society thing?
Absolutely. There is a world of difference in the way and the type of language that's used with me, and that's part of what I was after in terms of being who I am,
Hmm.
is that it's a lot more collegiate, inclusive, and soft rather than the brusque male, almost adversarial at all times approach of sort of barking orders and expecting snappy answers like that. I thoroughly enjoy just having a natter with the girls, and similarly being able to use the collective pronoun girls and not sound like I'm demeaning anybody is
Mm-hmm.
hugely a relief. Similarly, there is a lot more respect in some ways in terms of things like I have had more compliments in the past month in terms of, oh, just you look nice today or something like that than I've had in years.
Wow, that's nice.
So that's very much nice as far as I'm concerned anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a thing, isn't it? Like guys, just to generalize for a moment. I mean, it's not something that guys do much of, I suppose, is it?
No, it's not a terribly man's man approach to anything.
Yeah. Well, that must feel nice then to have that acknowledged, right?
Absolutely. I mean, in the past week, in fact, I've had two particular incidents of what I refer to as the warm and fuzzies. It's just
Mhm.
this glow inside and a warmth because something's nice has happened. The
Mhm.
first was where a colleague of mine actually referred to me as she in an email to another person, and it was the first time that it's actually been written by somebody else, and it was just a
Mhm.
case of a massive affirmation of
Ah,
me.
yeah.
And it was a completely benign communication, to be honest. It was like, oh, I passed it on to Cameron because she set it up, but it
Mhm.
was just that implicit acknowledgement that that's me
Mhm.
was incredibly empowering.
Mhm.
And the second one was later on the same week, where a colleague of mine, female, that I do work closely with, but only in certain times. So
Mhm.
we're not constantly talking to each other.
Mhm.
Actually, it described me as glamorous, which I think has been one of the nicest things anyone has actually ever said to me.
Oh, that.
But I can't imagine that being a description that would have been applied to my old life,
Mm.
and that was thoroughly gratifying.
Oh, that sounds really lovely. Oh well, I want to wish you the best of luck and all that with your new journey. It's so exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I won't be making too many mistakes,
Yeah.
but I'm sure I will make a few.
Yeah. No one gets the handbook with life, do they? To be fair.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I guess I'm perhaps hypersensitive to it because of the mechanic of trans,
Mhm.
is that acceptance is going to be a big thing, and it is a big thing for me because I didn't accept, or I didn't allow myself to accept who I was for the longest time.
Mm.
So I'm kind of predisposed to not wanting to stick out, not wanting to be terribly ostentatious or overboard or anything like that. I'm not going to be appearing on RuPaul anytime soon. So it's a case of very gently, very calm and measured steps
Mhm.
into this new journey.
Mm. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that you've shared.
Absolutely, you're welcome.
You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Cameron, where you can also read the transcript. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com and on social media. If you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Plans start from only $1 a month. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender for more details. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded. Let me just... Oh, there is a list I need to look at, and I haven't got it on screen. 1 second. Always the way, isn't it? Where's my list? God. Yeah.
Welcome to the world of teaching.
Yeah. How was that for you?
That was good, thank you.
Cool.
Very painless.
Good. Yeah.